Good morning, students. I welcome all my dear children in my presentation on the short story named The Model Millionaire, written by Oscar Wilde. So, let me give you a very brief introduction on Oscar Wilde at first. So, Oscar Wilde was a very famous Irish poet. He has written many short stories like The Canterville Ghost, The Selfish Giant, The Portrait of Mr. W.H., and he has also written many plays like The Importance of Being Earnest, etc. He was born in 1854 in Dublin, which is in Ireland, and he died in 1900 in France. So, appearances can be deceptive, can't they? We might spot someone who appears dirty and we think that they are homeless, when in reality, they just come out from helping in rebuilding someone's home that was damaged in a fire. Likewise, we may spy someone well dressed heading into an expensive restaurant and decide that they must be a wealthy man, when in reality, they are a newspaper reporter heading to interview someone. So, the characters in Oscar Wilde's short story, The Model Millionaire, experience their own issues with appearance. The story's central character is Hughie Erskine. He believes a beggar man to be a poor man, and he gives him some money. As it turns out, the beggar man is in fact one of Europe's wealthiest men who has commissioned an artist to paint his portrait wearing rags. So the artist reminds Erskine that there is beauty in things that may not be immediately seen or may not be immediately recognized as beautiful. So the story focuses on the ideas of the perception of class, beauty, wealth, kindness that makes us tell a strong lesson for readers. That beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and that wealth and kindness are not as always linked with each other. So let's take a closer look at these lessons through the themes of Oscar Wilde's story. Okay, so let's start the story. So Hughie Erskine was wonderfully good looking with his crisp brown hair, clear-cut profile and grey eyes. He was as popular with men as he was with women, and he had every accomplishment to boast of, except that of his making money. He had tried everything, the stock exchange, tea trading, wine trading, but business was too dry. Ultimately, he became nothing. Just a delightful young man with a perfect profile and no profession. So here we are presented with the main character of the story, and his name was Hughie Erskine. He was wonderfully good looking with a brown hair and a very clear cut profile, means his face with very clear cut features. That means he was a very handsome young man with grey eyes. He was very popular with the men as well as with the women because he had every accomplishment. Accomplishment means, the meaning of accomplishments is written at the end of the story in your book only. It means achievement. Okay. To boast of means to be proud of. He had every achievement to be proud of. He was very good looking, very handsome. But one thing in his character is that he didn't have any money. He tried everything to make money in the stock exchange, in tea trading, wine trading, but he failed in every business wherever he tried. Ultimately, he became nothing, just a delightful, a happy young man with a beautiful face and with no profession and no money. And to make the matter worse, he was in love. He was in love with Laura Martin, the daughter of the retired colonel who had lost his temper and his digestion in India. That means he was a colonel. The colonel was a very angry man, and he has lost his digestion in India. Means that the process to digest food, the capacity to digest food, he has lost in India because he has eaten spicy food over there. So in as a result of that, he has lost his digestion. He had never found either of them again. Laura adored Huey, and he was ready to kiss her shoestrings. Means Laura is in love with Huey. No matter whatever his profession was, she was in love with Huey, and she adored him a lot. They were the handsomest couple in London. They looked beautiful together. No money between them. Though they didn't have any money between them, still they were the handsomest couple in London. The colonel was very fond of Yugi, but he wouldn't come up with the news of the engagement, but he was not willing to do the engagement with her daughter. Of course, Huey Erskine wanted to marry Laura, but the colonel said that come, my boy, when you have got £10,000 on your own, and you will see about it. So the colonel told Huey that when you will be having £10,000 in your hand, at that time I will give Laura's hand in your hand, not before that. So Huey looked very glum in those days, means that he looked very sad in those days because he was unable to marry Laura, the love of his life. So one morning on his way to Holland Park, where the Martins lived, he dropped in to see a great friend of his, and his name was Alan Trevor. Trevor was a painter. Personally, he was a strange, rough fellow with a freckled face. Freckled means there are marks of freckles all over his face. Freckles are the brownish pigments or spot on the skin. And he also had a ragged beard. Ragged beard means not smooth enough. His beard is not smooth enough. However, when he took up the brush, he was a real master. That means he was a very good painter, and his pictures were eagerly sought after. Sought after means his pictures were in great demand because he can draw very beautifully. When Huey came in, he found Trevor putting the finishing touches to a wonderful life-size picture of a beggar man. So you can see in the picture as well that Alan Trevor was drawing with his easel. He was drawing the picture of a beggar man, and the beggar man was standing in front of him. The beggar himself was standing on a raised platform in a corner of the studio, as you can see it in the picture as well. The beggar was a wizened old man with a face like wrinkled parchment and a most piteous expression. Over his shoulders was flung a coarse brown cloak, all tears and tatters. His thick boots were patched and cobbled. He was a wizened old man. Wizened means meaning is written at the end of the story in your book. Wizened means old and wrinkled. And parchment means materials made from the skin of a sheep or goat used in the past for writing on. So here are the meanings. Wizened meaning is written and parchment meaning. Okay. So the beggar looked very old, wrinkled with age. His face was wrinkled in parchment, means it was a stiff, flat. His face doesn't look very good, and almost a piteous expression, a very miserable expression was there in his face. Over his shoulders there was a flung there was flung a coarse brown cloak. Cloak means an oversized garment or cloth that was there over his shoulders. It seemed that his clothes were very old, and these clothes are almost torn, and they are stitched in many places because they are torn horribly. They are stitched and they looked very rough, very old, very dirty, just like the beggar man. In his one hand, he was holding a battered hat for alms. Alms means for the money or the food or the help that he was seeking. He was holding a hat so that money or in the means of help can be given in that hat. Okay. So, what an amazing model, whispered Huey as he shook hands with his friends. So, Huey looked very excited as he saw the model. An amazing model? Shouted Trevor at the top of his voice. I should think so. Such beggars as he are not to be met with every day. So he said that this kind of beggars will not find every day in the streets nowadays. My stars, I am very lucky that I have found a beggar in the street today for being my model, who has come over here to be my model, and I am drawing his picture. What an etching Rembrandt would have made of him. So who was Rembrandt? Rembrandt was the famous Dutch painter. Okay, you can see his painting right now, that it is his self-portrait. He has portrayed himself. It is his picture. And etching means a picture painted from a metal plate with a design cut into it. So Trevor is saying that he would made a great painting with that model, just like Rembrandt would do. Okay, as beautiful as Rembrandt, you would be drawing the picture of that beggar. Poor old chap, said Hughie. How miserable he looks. But I suppose to you painters his face is his fortune. Certainly, replied Trevor. You don't want a beggar to look happy, do you? Obviously, Trevor, replied Trevor, that you don't want a happy looking beggar. Of course, you wanted a miserable looking beggar to paint, of course. How much does a model get for sitting? Asked Hughie, as he found himself a comfortable seat on a divan. So he was sitting on a divan and he asked the question that how much does a model get after each sitting? A shilling an hour. What is a shilling? So shilling is a British coin. So he said that a shilling for an hour. How much do you get for a picture, Alan? So he asked, how much would you be getting after the drawing of the picture is completed? Oh, for this I would get 2,000. So 2,000 pounds you would be getting. Guineas, painters, poets and physicians always get guineas. Guineas is a currency. Okay. They get, the painters, the poet, the physicians, they used to get their money in guineas. Well, I think the model should have a percentage of the guinea that you would be receiving, cried Hughie, laughing. They work quite hard, just like you do. So just like you people, just like the painters, the model should get the share of your money, because they are also working very hard, just like you. Nonsense, nonsense. Why look at the trouble of laying on the paint alone and standing all day long at one's easel? It's all very well, Hughie, for you to talk, but I assure you that there are moments when art almost attains to the dignity of manual labor. But you must not chatter. I am very busy. Have a coffee and keep quiet. So in this paragraph, what is easel? Easel is a wooden frame for holding an artist's work while it is being painted or being drawn. So Alan Trevor said that I am standing all day with the easel and Huey, you are doing nothing but talking. Chatter means talking, and you are doing nothing. You are just talking. Sometime, like the laborers, we painters also have to do our painting after a very hard work. So stop talking and let me do my work. So after some time, Alan Trevor has gone out of the room because a servant called him. And the old beggar man took advantage of Trevor's absence to rest for a moment on a wooden bench. So the beggar took advantage of Alan Trevor's absence and he sat on the wooden bench beside Huey. He looked so forlorn and wretched. He looked very sad, very wretched, very miserable that Huey felt sympathetic towards him, felt pitying him, sympathetic towards him. And he felt in his pocket that the money he had. He found a sovereign and some coins of some small value. Poor old fellow. So he thought him to be a poor old fellow. So he was very sympathetic towards him. And he has given a sovereign the money to the poor beggar. And he that means that he would be walking across the studio, and because he has given the money to the beggar's hand, that means he will be walking. There will be no carriages for him on that day. So the old man started, and with a faint smile flitted across his withered lips. Flitted means just move in very quickly. It just so flitted means move swiftly. It moved very swiftly. The smile moved very swiftly over his old wrinkled lips, and he said, "Thank you, sir. Thank you." Then Trevor arrived, and Huey took his leave, blushing a little at what he had done, as he had helped the poor man, the poor beggar. That's why he is blushing. He spent the day with Laura. So he spent the day with Laura, and he had got a very charming scolding, very little scolding, for he was spending a little too much amount of money from. So he got a very mild scolding from Laura as he spent the money. So he had to walk home because he had no money to ride on the carriages, as he had given his money to the beggar. That night he strolled into the Palette Club about 9 o'clock. Strolled means walked into the Palette Club about 9 o'clock. And he found Trevor over there, sipping his latte. What is latte? So it was coffee. So Trevor was sipping his cup of coffee. At that time, Huey entered into that room. "Well, Alan, did you get the picture finished all right?" he said as he lowered himself into the armchair. So he asked if Alan had already finished his picture of the beggar. "Finished and framed, my boy. I have finished my work and I have framed the picture already," answered Trevor. "And by the by, you have made a conquest. You have won something. You have won something. That old model you saw is quite devoted you. I had to tell him all about you, who you are, where you live, what your income is, what prospects you have." So Alan Trevor told Huey that he has told everything about Huey to that beggar, because the beggar was very interested in him. The beggar asked many questions about him. So he has told him everything about Huey. My dear Alan," cried Huey, "I shall probably find him waiting for me when I go home. But of course you are only joking. Poor old wretch. I wish I could do something for him. I think it is dreadful that anyone should be so miserable." So Huey told Alan that it makes him very terrible. It makes him very frightful to think someone so unhappy, so sad. so deprived as the beggar was at that time. So he felt very pity for him in his heart. So he helped him. I have got heaps of old clothes at home. Do you think he would care for any of them? Why his rags were falling to bits? Because he was wearing so torn clothes, so tattered clothes. Okay, the clothes, all the clothes were very dirty. They are almost torn to pieces. So I have many clothes in my home. Could I bring all of that to help the beggar? Should I bring all my old clothes and give it to the beggar, because the beggar looked very old, very miserable? So I am feeling very sympathetic for him. But he looks splendid in them, said Trevor. I wouldn't paint him in a dress coat for anything. What you call rags, I call romance. What seems poverty to you, is picturesqueness to me. However, I will tell him of your offer. So Trevor said, Shall I be drawing? So Trevor was asking Hughie, Shall I be drawing a beggar with a coat? Is it possible? If you are calling something, calling whatever he was wearing, if you call it rags, I will call it romance. It was beautiful. It was beautiful for my painting, so I would call it a romance. What seems poverty to you? If it seems poor to you, it's picturesqueness to me. Picturesque means picture perfect and strikingly pleasing and beautiful to me. It's absolutely beautiful for my painting. He looked just perfect, just like a beggar. So I will tell him that you have offered your clothes to him, that I will convey your message to him. Alan, said Hughie seriously, you painters are heartless people. An artist's heart is head, replied Trevor. And besides, our business is to reveal the world as we see it, not to reform it as we know it. And now tell me, how is Laura? The old model was quite interested in her. So he said that tell me about something about Laura, because the beggar was much interested in Laura. So the business of the painter is not to reform, not to change the world, okay, but to paint the world just as it is. Just paint the reality of the world, not to change the world. It is not their job. Okay, now tell me something about Laura, because the old model was very interested to know her. You don't mean to say you talked to him about her, said Hughie. So Hughie was very angry. Suddenly he got angry. Why? Because Alan Trevor asked about Laura to that old beggar. So he got very angry. So only this much for today, students. Next day we will continue with our story and we will learn that what happened to Hughie after that. And we will also learn that what was the consequence, that Hughie has helped the poor beggar. So what was the consequence of his helping of the poor beggar, that we will learn in our next lesson. Okay, thank you, students.